Okay, we are going to wait a few minutes for some folks to file in here. Everyone's looking good and awake and ready to go. And I say that as people are watching this kind of awkward space in the beginning, because we have a few people who are a few hours behind us here. So it's very early for a few people on the call. So we really appreciate you being here. We're also going to give just another minute for the interpreter to come on. You might have noticed the interpreter's not here yet. It would be, unfortunately, ironic if we had this conversation and there was not an interpreter on the Zoom call. So we're going to make sure that we let that happen. As people are filing into the Zoom chat here, and also maybe watching on Facebook where this is being streamed to the Ability Center's Facebook page. One quick note is that if you do need, there's a closed caption option at the bottom of the Zoom chat if that's how you're watching. So I would encourage you to do that. And if anyone has any questions as we get going, please feel free to put them in the chat on Zoom. There's also a Q&A box, so I will watch both of those areas for any questions. Okay, so I just got word that the interpreter is going to be joining us. So I would encourage anyone on the Zoom call that wants to use that feature, to use the closed captioning feature, to do that. Also, when we upload this to our site in our disability friendly toolkit, we will make sure that there are captions available on that recording, so that we can ensure accessibility. And then we'll have our interpreter pop in on the screen here in just a minute. So welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is, as you know, the end of the month of October, which is Disability Employment Awareness Month, and a really exciting month for us at the Ability Center. My name is Sam Meldon, and I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement here. At the Ability Center, we have been working through so many different stories and opportunities to share about employment assistance and opportunities for employers, and also people with disabilities in our community. That began on October 1st when we had a webinar. We hosted a webinar with Jill Simpson from Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, and that was a great conversation. And so I would encourage you to go back and watch that as well. But today we have a really exciting conversation with some new-ish friends from First Solar. And I want to introduce them. And we have a great opportunity to hear from several members of the team at First Solar, all throughout the organizational chart, really, which is exciting for us. And today you will be hearing from Aaron Bly. Aaron is the Chief Information Officer and he'll be able to share about accessibility and IT decision making. Also, we have Julie Reddington, HR Director and Global Diversity and Inclusion Leader, and she'll get to share about First Solar's focus on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. We also have Amy, is it Heisler? I should know that by now. Heisler, wonderful. I'm glad I got that right. We have Amy Heisler, the Global Internal Communications on making employee, she'll be able to talk to us about making employee communications accessible. And hello to our interpreter. Wonderful, good to see you. And also, we have Adrian Bell. Now I have to say, our organization, the Ability Center, is very, very proud to have Adrian on the call. She also serves as a board member at the Ability Center, and we're excited to have her here. She, at First Solar, is an IT analyst, and she'll be sharing about her work in accessibility advocacy within First Solar. So I don't think I missed anything, and I hope you all appreciate my clever stalling tactics and what is going to be a very packed conversation here. So I would love to get into this as we have an opportunity to hear from the leadership at First Solar. What's really exciting, I want to underline the word global. So many, if you heard me in those introductions, you heard me say global in almost every single one. This is an exciting conversation because anyone listening to this webinar is going to be able to think about how it applies to their company. And that can scale. It can be a local company with 10 employees all the way up to, a company with a presence all over the world. And so we just could not be more grateful for all of you being on the call. So thank you so much. Let's start with Julie, if that's okay. Yeah. Please share with us a little bit about just First Solar's kind of journey with inclusion, diversity, and belonging. We would love to kind of just like lay the groundwork on what First Solar's been up to.
Absolutely. Thanks. And thank you for having us. Thank you for inviting me. I truly do appreciate it. So yeah, I'd be happy to share that with you. First Solar obviously is very passionate about the topic overall. And how we view diversity is it's very comprehensive and multidimensional. And that's primarily because it's a global company. So it's not, typical for like a US centric company. We're working towards having a diverse workplace as well as culture and associates. So we want to bring together as many diverse associates as possible around the world with different experiences, but also different capabilities that ultimately combine, and those enhance the overall capabilities of the enterprise. And that can't be done obviously by one individual. It can't just be done by the leadership team. It takes everybody in the organization working towards that common goal. So historically, when we first started getting into a focus on diversity and inclusion and belonging, it was very US centric. And it didn't take us very long to realize that, hey, listen, we're a global company. And if you want to do this right, you've got to expand that. So what we've decided to do is look at the framework a little bit differently going forward. So we have a more global definition of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And what we're doing is it's highly localized through the execution in each regional location. So we're developing regional coalitions. So because sometimes when you focus on diversity from an ethnicity standpoint, what that looks like in our Malaysia location is going to be very different than what that looks like in your US location. So we're developing this more coalitions and localized markets so that they can then drive towards results in those markets. So what we're also doing is driving more employee-based or employee-owned groups within these different locations. So we want to make sure that each location is driving towards a diverse workforce that looks more like our customer base, our shareholder base, et cetera. So these local groups are centralized, and they're like the US portion of the diversity and inclusion leadership team is monitoring what they set for action plans and desired results. So that includes things like global networking groups, employee resource groups, and all of those groups work through the central location in the United States. So we want to make sure that each one of those has a mission and a vision that's compatible with First Solar's culture and the philosophy. So right now we're in the process of launching some of those groups. We're also in the process of launching coalitions in our APAC region. So it's all starting to come together now. So, we talk about diversity and inclusion and belonging being a journey, and it definitely is a journey. It takes time, and there's times where you have to course correct and change direction. So we're also looking at how do we put that into action. So we want to make sure that we're focusing our efforts related to hiring individuals with disabilities, as well as what most people will set their diversity and inclusion and belonging goals around gender, race, ethnicity. We want to make sure we also have a very targeted approach on individuals with disability and providing an inclusive workplace that supports their success. Right now, our Perrysburg location has specifically collaborated with organizations. I think, Sam, you mentioned opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. I know we're also working with Work Leads to Independence to both not just hire individuals with disabilities, but also obtain resources to help educate our associates, educate our leadership, provide resources, provide additional training and education. So inevitably, the end goal is to become increasingly more competitive, be more innovative throughout the world by fostering this diversity inclusion globally and locally in a variety of aspects. Um, Obviously, because it's a journey, we also know there's always going to be room for improvement. We have to continually course correct. So we leverage things like engagement surveys, quantitative data collection. We use focus groups. We confer with industry contacts so we can ensure that we're incorporating best practices. Anytime I get a name of somebody, either through Amy or somebody else, we're setting up phone calls so we can understand what they're doing to be successful so that we can make sure that we're doing that. We want to be sure what we're doing is harnessing leading edge practices and implementing those across the organization. We truly have a passion to learn and grow and to ultimately help lead the energy sector in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's sort of a one step at a time. But I feel like we've made a lot of progress over the last 2 years and continue to see that we've got goals, opportunities set to continue to look at different aspects of diversity and inclusion and belonging as we move along.
Well, I appreciate that, Julie. I want to say that something I really appreciate is this notion of the word belonging. I mean, someone might be watching the screen and think, and quite frankly, you see that we'll just talk about it. When you're talking about diversity and inclusion, I think we can't be afraid to talk about what is very evident. And what you have is you're looking at a conversation about diversity and inclusion, and there are no people of color on the screen, right? I love,
Mhm.
Julie, that you pointed out, how does it look in a global context? That's an interesting point for First Solar, I'm sure. But the other thing I want to highlight is that our conversation today is not how to nail your diversity and inclusion strategy. Our conversation today is how do we ensure that accessibility and people with disabilities are not left out of your diversity and inclusion strategy. Because unfortunately, as some of my colleagues at the Ability Center know, when we talk about, when we observe it, is that so many times you can have diversity and inclusion conversations and people with disabilities are completely left out. And so I just wanted to kind of really acutely ground this conversation in what we're here to talk about. But certainly hearing about the work that First Solar's done and the leadership in your field and all around the globe is really inspiring. And I'm just really glad that we got to start off with that high level overview. So what we also know, before we get into Adrian's amazing work, and I'll call it what it is. It's really impressive stuff, what you're all doing, what Adrian's kind of been leaning into. We also know that none of this happens without leadership buy-in. And so Aaron, as the CIO of this organization, of this company, just talk to me about how leadership has bought in and equipped empowered, even allowed, employees to run with things that they're passionate about and to really, um, you know, push First Solar forward. Talk to me about the leadership buy-in.
Yeah, so let me kind of piggyback off what Julie kind of started talking about with diversity, right? And then you picked up on the right thing, right? What's the opportunity? How do we make this accessible to everyone? Let me spend a minute talking about talent, right? All of us as leaders know, it's tough to find the talent we need to make our company successful. And if you're not thinking about accessibility, right, you're excluding a segment of the population that has a lot of talent that can bring not only diversity improvements or thinking, but just talent alone. And so, from a leadership perspective, it's very important that we not exclude, and we make First Solar attractive to that audience, right? It's not necessarily that we're not, I'm not after trying to reach quotas. I'm after trying to find the best talent that can make our company successful. And with that, I can't exclude an important segment of our community. And so, it's very important for us to not only make ourselves accessible and attractive, and I'll talk about attractive here in a second, but also when they become First Solar associates, right? We want to make sure everybody can achieve their to their extent that they are able to offer. And so, it's interesting that, a few years ago, that was, you were limited to what you could do, right? That entailed, making your facility accessible to people with either short-term or long-term accessibility concerns, right? Or in the case of Adrian, making sure that we had an interpreter available, so she wouldn't miss out on those conversations. But as the technology has increased and improved, right now there's so much stuff that we have available at our fingertips and then my priority is, attracting people like Adrian to our company, and then making sure that she's set up for success, because I want to get, selfishly, right? I want to get as much value out of what Adrian has to offer as I can. And if we don't do things like this, we're missing out, and we're not allowing Adrian to reach her full potential. So that talent aspect, let's be real, from a corporate perspective, is important. Now, when you talk about encouraging people to take the time to do things like this, I mean, one, it comes down to having people in your organization that have an interest, right? And you want to encourage those interests. Again, I've been very fortunate. Adrian and I have worked together for 14 years. She's taught me a lot, right? I'm a lot more aware because of her, and I can never thank her enough for making me aware. And so, as a leadership team, I mean, it's important for us to be aware, encourage our associates like Adrian to really grasp that passion and make a difference and support it. And I tell you, it's been a blessing, because it's made us think things differently. Like I said, on the technology side, now, especially with Microsoft, it's really enabled us to leverage some things to make it more accessible. And then not only from this community perspective, but we talked about the global nature, right? Over in Asia, right? We have we have 1,000 associates that English is either their second or third, or not their standard language. And so, as we roll out things for here, it's also from a accessibility to those that language is an issue. And so those are the types of things that, we're seeing big gains for. And I'm excited to really support this initiative, as well as the rest of the leadership team.
Thanks, Aaron. That is good to hear. I love how there's so much of what I'm hearing in your comments that talk about this almost overlap of interests, right? When you want to find the best talent, just purely and unashamedly find the best talent, well, that means you have to make it as accessible and wide open and inclusive as possible. And then it's so fascinating to think about from a global perspective when you might have, you know, associates that don't speak English. Well, there's a different type of, you know, bridge you have to build as well, and how that all ties into accessibility. And it's just a fascinating story. And now I'm excited to kind of get into what does that actually mean. I think there's a lot of folks who watch these webinars conversations and they think, man, Julie and Aaron, they're impressive. They know their stuff. And they're thinking, the people watching this webinar, they're thinking about their company, their organization, their nonprofit, and they're going, what does it look like? What do we do? And I'm excited to hear from Adrian about what it looks like. So Adrian, talk to us about your work. Feel free to, excuse me, to you know, bounce off of anything that Julie and Aaron just said, but go ahead, Adrian.
Sure. So, you know, as Aaron kind of mentioned, we've been working together for roughly 14 years. So I definitely want to highlight the fact that, you know, this didn't happen overnight. You know, my position at First Solar and, you know, being comfortable self-identifying my disability came through you know, being comfortable in the work environment and, you know, having good relationships with several people within First Solar. So the journey that I'm going to take you through was, you know, really, it started out many years ago in establishing my relationships with Aaron and my current boss. And really making sure that I had the right allies and stakeholders to help promote accessibility and interline it into our daily functions. So, so Sam, as you kind of, you know, as we've talked, you kind of asked, where did we start? And, you know, what, you know, kind of walk you through our journey. If you would like to share the PowerPoint slide, what we ended up doing was we evaluated the Disability Equality Index scorecard, which is basically a benchmarking tool that offers an objective score on their disability inclusion policy and practices. So we gap analysis and identify key areas where we wanted to take a deeper dive. Some of these areas we've been proactive and we've started pursuing, and in other areas, you know, obviously we can't do everything at once. So, you know, in the future, we hope to take a deeper dive in. So what you will see, though, is that we quickly realized that it's important to find allies and stakeholders throughout the organization. You can see that really incorporating disability inclusion is about having everyone in your organization be on board. So, you know, and that is where I think what Julie mentioned, employee resource network group is beneficial. And, you know, it's crucial that, you know, you can find some sort of executive sponsorship to hold you accountable as you go through the initiative. The method that we took at First Solar was really to educate our employees first, to start incorporating accessibility in our day-to-day function, and then understand exactly what's working and what's not working, and then evolve from there. So when we talk about educating our employees, a couple of things that we did from a technology standpoint was we're creating an accessibility group on our private social networking platform. So every week we post something to educate our employees, and the topics can range from disability etiquette, how to write proper alternative text descriptions for your images, accessibility tips and tricks using the tools that we have in-house. We are also creating an accessibility internet site, which provides useful resources and documentation on various different subject matters. So it can go from, we have documentation around how to host a inclusive, accessible, workshop or virtual event. We have training documentation for developers for training materials for developers on how to build accessible web or desktop applications. And then obviously documentation on how to integrate content into accessible using the technologies we have in-house. So to elaborate on that a little bit, what Aaron kind of mentioned is that we discovered with our Microsoft product that it comes with an accessibility checking, which runs like spell check. It provides the user's recommendations on how to make their matches inclusive. It will check a wide range of things to ensure that you have alt text for your images, that your tables are formatted correctly, that you have sufficient color contrast, and many other things. So leveraging the technology that we have in-house, we've also discovered some great third-party apps that are free. One of the tools that we're currently using is called Accessibility Insights, which evaluates and calls out critical accessibility defects on web pages. So when at First Solar, when we were revamping our internet site, we took that opportunity to ensure that our new design was accessible using Accessibility Insights. We acknowledge that, running accessibility tools does not mean that it's 100% accessible. So we also found that hosting usability sections using volunteers within your community is extremely helpful as well. And we did that with our external website. But not only is it about leveraging your existing technology and third-party apps, but it's also ensuring that we're setting our future generations up for success at First Solar. We've incorporated accessibility as part of our scorecard for new technology, whether that's, IT purchasing a new software or a new hardware. We've incorporated accessibility as a criteria of that scorecard. And though, we kind of have a criteria for each of the different subject matters. So we have vendor evaluations, hardware, telecommunications, software, and web accessibility. So this will ensure that in the future, as we are purchasing different technology, that, we're ensuring that that platform is accessible, or at least understanding what the alternatives are to provide reasonable accommodations if that platform is not 100% accessible. Moving on, we really we're interested in taking a deeper dive in the hiring and interviewing process. Some of the things that, you can evaluate within your own business or company is ensuring that you have accessible job postings, and that you have a statement there that is related to your commitment to disability inclusion. We, in terms of engaging what's working and what's not working on a day-to-day function, we've found that feedback using surveys, active town halls, webinars, team collaboration sessions were extremely beneficial. Obviously, you will need to have measurable outcomes. And the way to do that is through your employee engagement surveys. We recognize that 70% of those with disability are invisible. So, you want to create an environment where your employees feel comfortable and that they can self-identify as having a disability. So an employee engagement survey is one way to have a measurable outcome. In terms of recruiting, we've actually had a First Solar booth at our Opportunity for Ohioans with Disability Career Job Fair. We've also, and Julie kind of mentioned, we've also done some other partnerships with other programs out there. In San Francisco, we've done autism hiring program. So, that really can help broaden our talent pool in terms of making sure that we have a diverse pool of set of candidates. In terms of educating our employees internally, there are a couple of things that we've been looking at from an organizational training perspective. The opportunity for Ohioans with disabilities offer windmill disability training, which are basically interactive modules that are designed for employers to examine personal attitudes and bias toward people with disabilities. And they're free, so they're great. Those are great resources to use if you're a small business and you're looking to educate your own employees. We've also looked into internal webinars or hosting internal webinars to educate employees. And, from a facility and safety perspective, one of the things that we took advantage of was the opportunity for Ohioans with disabilities will come on site and do a work site accessibility evaluation. That is extremely helpful in terms of getting feedback on how we can make things accessible, whether it's the entrance to your building or your workspace. They were extremely helpful in providing, creative solutions to ensure that your entrance or workspace is accessible. So we've really we've learned a lot through that workspace accessibility evaluation. So I guess, as part of this gap analysis, I think what we've discovered is that, we really believe that the key to our success was to interline accessibility within our current project and day-to-day work as, when possible. There are certain situations where it might make sense to have a separate initiative, but far too often the priority of that project will fall to the bottom of the pile. So, we really try to interline the accessibility within our current project. We've discovered it's far more costly to undo or fix later than to incorporate it upfront.
So I want to take this slide down. Anyone watching understands that there's a lot there. There is a lot on that slide. There's a lot that, Adrian, that you just covered. I just want to let everyone rest assured who's watching this that you're going to be able to go to our website and find that slide, this webinar, and a list of the resources that Adrian just outlined. Adrian, I think you and I had talked about at one point about some of the misconceptions even of what it takes to provide an accommodation or make it make sense, depending on any employee's particular needs. Could you, because that was so impressive. I mean, the one time you told me some of the numbers associated with that, I found that to be so interesting and valuable for people who might approach this topic with a little apprehension and trepidation. They're not sure quite how to begin. You had some encouraging numbers on that.
So in terms of, Sam, can you repeat the question for the numbers?
Yes, when you think about making, specifically making an accommodation, with the percentage of accommodations that don't cost anything, and then what an average accommodation.
Yeah. So based on the research that I discovered, according to the Job Accommodation Network in the United States, specifically the disability employment, I think 59% of the accommodation costs absolutely nothing, while the rest typically costs between about roughly $500 per employee with a disability. So, that's interesting from a United States perspective because, when we think of it from that perspective, if we can make our content accessible for our employees, then we may actually be saving, corporate dollars, right? Just by doing that. So that's why it's, important to look at accessibility as part of a DI strategy.
I wanted to highlight that because it really ties in so well to what Aaron said earlier. Every company is trying to find talent and find the best possible talent available. And, Aaron, Julie, from your kind of positions in leadership, I think if I were to tell you, you can find someone that's going to bring incredible value, they're going to be within your company, providing that value for a long time, and it might cost, well, 59%. So the majority of the time, it's not going to cost anything to make that accommodation. And even if it does cost something, the average is around maybe $500 to get that employee in a position where they are going to be most successful. I mean, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah, it makes it really easy to approve the stuff that doesn't cost anything. And I think from a leadership perspective, right? I mean, you have to find the easy ways, right? There's a lot of hard ways. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of these things that Adrian was talking about, right? It takes people to get together in the room and figure this stuff out. What's important for us is to, have those focused efforts, but also make it part of the day-to-day operation. So as we roll out things within IT, software around the company, right? And this is a recent development, so I don't want to pretend like we've always done this, but now we have incorporated into, we call it a critical design review, right? Anything that we're going to roll out, we review that design up front. And now thinking about accessibility is just part of the process, right? And we want to make sure, and Amy's done a great job of us helping us think through, how are we communicating these things? How are people going to use it? But you want to get to the point where this stuff just becomes second nature, and then it becomes really easy. So it's really good that a lot of these tools are available at a low or no cost. We continue to put pressure on the Microsofts and of the world to, hey, we can't exclude people from leveraging your tools and the message that we're trying to deliver. And so those things are very important to, you got to put the work in, you got to have teams that are going to assess how are we doing, what do we need to do. But at the same time, as you incorporate that thing into, what you're doing today, and it becomes part of work, then, everything you roll out becomes more accessible, and it just becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Julie, did you want to chime in there? I don't want to move on without.
No, I think Aaron covered it. I think the goal is that it becomes second nature, where you don't think about it. Your diversity and inclusion journey, regardless of what it is it always starts like this, but your goal is to get to the top. So then it just kind of rolls downhill, right? Nobody has to think about it. It's second nature. Everybody is speaking the same language about, okay, did we have this type of candidate, this type of candidate, this type of candidate? Are you reaching out? Are we doing targeted recruiting? Or, are we making sure that whatever we're rolling out to the organization is compatible for all? So yeah, that is definitely the goal.
Well, I think the thing that I love about where this conversation is right now is, I think that we can talk about culture change and how do you embed this type of understanding and these values into a culture within a company. And sometimes I think culture and that can be like an abstract concept. It's hard to put your hands around it. It's like, when it's there, but you're not quite sure how to make it happen, but then that slide that Adrian put up, it's almost a diagnosis. It's a bit of a snapshot of this is what it is. So it's not some fluffy abstract, notion. Amy, I ask you a question. I want to just mention too, that on Adrian's slide that we just put up, Adrian, you were highlighting actually a lot of different partnerships that I just want to make sure that people should feel supported and encouraged as they're watching this conversation. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. The Disability Equality Index is something that is available, and it's a great tool. If you're in Ohio, opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. You even mentioned, doing something with the Ability Center. That is a shameless plug. There are organizations that are there to help make sure that employers know how to make this happen. And it's not, it's not up to anyone to go and reinvent the wheel, for sure. So I just wanted to highlight that. So Amy, as we keep thinking about culture, how is this received? Tell me, give us a sense of, so, the values that they're at the top, the leadership buy-in is there. You have, the boots on the ground, so to speak. You have employees who really, really care about this work. But how is it kind of received throughout the rest of the employee base?
Well, thanks, Sam. And, to just piggyback a lot on what people have said before, we look at it from an inclusion standpoint, which also means that we're looking at it from how are we not leaving anybody out? Because from a corporate culture perspective, we're only successful if everybody is part of that team, and everyone needs to feel connected. And therefore we need to find the barriers between our people and our information. So from an internal communications perspective, we have a lot of tools. We're kind of the sounding board, the megaphone for all the company culture and the information. And you want to make sure everybody has access to that. And as we've noted before, it's a work in partnership. It's not just, Adrian trying to work on something. It's just not Aaron trying to work on something. I mean, we've got on this call, IT, HR, communications. It's really a partnership of how are we identifying barriers for everybody. And as we've noted before, we have a large amount of our workforce. We have around, between 5,000 and 6,000 people all over the world. And within that, we have people with different abilities, different language proficiencies, and demands on their time and attention. And so we really have to look at it that accessible content is for everybody, and even in how people learn. Are they visual learners? Are they auditory learners? So as technology evolves, the usage moves beyond one target group. And for other companies listening today, this isn't something to think about as an add-on. Like, oh, what should we be doing for this one group of people? Because anytime you're increasing accessibility, it's increasing accessibility for everybody. For example, we've got a lot more people working from home now. Maybe they're busy working parents and they need to use a screen reader, just to get through their emails or just to get through the news while they're doing other things. So while it's not just for those people with limited vision abilities. So in the tools that we have that, working with Adrian and Aaron, we make sure in our internal communications that every image has alternative text, and it's super easy, where the tools are. So it's just one step that we do to ensure that things are readable, things are accessible. So that's just built in now to our new processes, as we've got the new Microsoft SharePoint Modern, super easy, and it adds a huge value, and it's a tool that we already have. So it's just adding that step to your communications processes. Talk about closed captioning. Microsoft Stream is where we host our company videos. It automatically creates a closed caption file for subtitles. And all you have to do is make sure that's turned on. You have to go through and edit it later a little bit because it's not quite perfect, and that's where it's just part of that step. You upload a video, you double check it, it's got closed captioning. And now you've made it accessible for maybe somebody that doesn't want to listen to it with maybe the volume on. So in addition to people that, might not be able to hear very well, you've got your closed captioning. You also have people that are English as a second language, and they might need to be able to hear and read at the same time to fully understand that message. So, as we look through, accessibility and accommodations, I really encourage people to move past the idea that, oh, we have to do this for one small group of people, because everybody benefits when you increase accessibility. Like just think, for example, our corporate headquarters, we've got, a little button that opens the door. Well, I've used that many times when my hands are full, but it's accessibility for people with mobility issues, but other people use it because it increases their accessibility. So I really want to encourage the teams out there and the companies out there to think of it not so much, oh, we have to do this one thing for this one group of people, because accessibility is for everybody. So I guess that's like the main point I want to get across is not creating some burdensome extra task. It's not expensive. There's tools out there. As Adrian said, there's third-party tools. It's just building that into your processes. It's getting everybody on board. It's having the leadership support. It's getting the right teams involved. And it's about having that conversation, because if you think of accessibility as a standalone initiative, it's not going to work as well as if you just make this part of how you do business internally and how are you getting the best out of everybody. Because if somebody has to struggle to get information, or there's a barrier to get that information, they're spending so much extra energy just trying to get to that point of getting the information, that's energy they could have been spending actually being productive, being innovative. So thank you. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk about, the work that we've been doing with Adrian and Aaron and Julie, and just how we are just incorporating this as just a standard practice and how we operate. So everybody in the company is part of our journey together, because we can only be successful if we have everybody on board.
I think it's really great. It's just really great stuff that you're all sharing. I think the thing that's particularly striking to me, Amy, that you just mentioned is this idea that there's this Venn diagram kind of overlap of, as you think about how to effectively communicate with all of your employees, you're saying when you think about, learning styles and access to even technology or language proficiency, that kind of really just levels the playing field of a company understanding that we're going to leverage technology to make sure that we're communicating with each one of our members as a human being, exactly where they are and how they would like to be communicated to. Well, that's what it's all about. That's what accessibility is. It's simply saying, how do you communicate? How do you get information? How do you respond to that information? And how can we work together in that? So it is such a holistic view. So I'm going to ask a question for the group here. And I understand this is a risky question. This will probably end up being a webinar in and of itself, because it's been such a historic moment that we're all living in and experiencing. What lessons, Amy, you brought up COVID. You brought up this moment that we're in and people working from home, and I see, different backgrounds. You see, this is not my office. This is my little office in my house. What lessons should we be learning from this moment of COVID and working from home in terms of accessibility, and what lessons can companies draw from to understand how they can create a more inclusive workplace? Anyone can take that and run with it.
Well, I think I'll start that off in that we have to understand that people are consuming information in a variety of different ways. We've got a lot of different pressures. Currently, there's a lot of stress. So if you think about, okay, what tools do we have that we can leverage, that we can use to reach people where they are? Understanding that, you may not have access to, sit and just read through your emails or read through company messages. You may need to try to catch up like while you're running errands. So it's really looking at what tools do we have to make it accessible, because everybody's consuming information differently. You may have shorter time span attentions. So a lot of that is, again, when we look at accessibility and inclusion, it benefits everybody to understand, okay, how do we make sure that we're removing the barriers to our information? Like, what are people facing right now that keeps them from actually consuming and understanding the information that we're trying to put out? So it's, okay, what are the technologies? Where do we think our people are? How do we get that to them? And how do we get that into a way that it's very easy to then consume that information and still feel connected? Because, we're at, everybody's like working from home, how do you make sure you still keep that culture of we're part of a team together when everybody's spread out? So it just puts a little more pressure on, just the way we use our information and how we get our information to people.
Yeah, I totally agree with Amy. I think one of the things that we found pretty early on when, it was like all of a sudden urgently, all these people are working from home was, to Amy's point, is everybody getting what they need to be able to do their jobs? Are they getting what they need to feel connected? What are their pain points? So pretty quickly, we put out a survey to say, okay, trying to hit the things that we could think about. First thing they did was put together a leadership team around COVID. Okay, what are the things we need to start looking at besides the safety aspect, because we have essential workers in our manufacturing, but we have that team. And then we have the team of, are the associates working from home who need a variety of support, no matter what that is, are they getting what they need? So putting together, the survey, getting that data back and starting to address that. And as Aaron knows, one of the top things was, I don't have an office set up at home. Okay, so what do you need to be able to make sure you can work from home? And, basically doing IT in a box. And if somebody has accessibility concerns, do you have what you need? Maybe you had something at the office that you don't have at home, making sure that we get the individuals what they need to be successful, much to Amy's point. Another big one was, people were teaching their children from home. So that's where it can kind of come in handy, what Amy was talking about. If you could get something that's basically reading your emails to you. So, if you've got a child that's, craving your attention. It's interesting with all of this going on, how much organizations have learned about themselves with having to adapt so quickly. But one of the things I think a lot of organizations are finding out is they can do it. We can quickly pivot, we can quickly adapt, and we can get the associates what they need from an accessibility standpoint, from feeling connected standpoint. We're putting out as much information as we can to leaders to help them to understand what they can do to help their associates as well. So it's the company really came together, and not just First Solar is learning that it can be done. You can pivot, you can do what you need to do to help folks have the accessibility, feel successful, feel connected. Other organizations are finding that as well.
It's great. I appreciate that. I do think there's a lot of lessons in the moment that we're in, and there have been a lot of lessons in this conversation, and we're closing in on an hour here. And so I want to ask everyone, if you have anything that you missed or that you want to share with our conversation here, and those listening, and want to mention as you think about that, there's a few really great compliments. Actually, we don't have a lot of questions in the chat. We just have a lot of people saying that the passion from this group is evident. There are people who work in this space, and they're just recognizing the efforts of First Solar. So I know you're all going to be wildly uncomfortable with this, but I just want to say to you, on behalf of the Ability Center and all of the consumers throughout 7 counties and 100 years of history, I feel very, very comfortable and confident saying, on behalf of that organization, really, really great work. Great job in what you're doing. I could, wax poetic about so much of what you're doing, how it's all throughout the organization. It's comprehensive. It's really within the culture. But at the end of the day, for us at the Ability Center, we're not a global organization. We're focused in our 7-county area, and that kind of Toledo is right there at the center of it. And we have been really unashamed about pursuing this vision of creating the most disability-friendly community in the country. And for us to do that, we understand that there are 7 opportunities, and that is healthcare and housing and education and employment and transportation. There's social opportunity, and then just physical access. Can you get around as you need to throughout a community? I'm not suggesting that there's a hierarchy of those 7 opportunities, but one thing I do know is that when people with disabilities have the access to meaningful employment, and when there are employment opportunities that they can be a part of, companies that exhibit the type of commitment that we've just been talking about for the last hour, when employees have those opportunities, it really opens up the 7 other, those 6 other, those areas. And so I just want to say that this is a really, really valuable conversation to everyone watching. Rest assured that we're going to kind of pull together all these resources and package it up in a way that's easy to find. You're not going to have to go, what was that thing that someone said, and go Google it yourself. We'll make sure it's all put together for you. To my First Solar friends, thank you so much for being here. I'll give you one last chance for anything else you want to mention, if anything.
For me, I just want to thank you for having us. This has been really great.
Yeah, thanks for letting us share the story. And I just also want to thank my colleagues for working in such close collaboration to bring all these changes and improvements to everybody.
Yeah, and I'll leave with just encouraging you to, like we said, a lot of these things are becoming easier to do. So please embrace them, right? If we all do our part, we can really help this community be better.
Adrian, anything you want to add?
I just wanted to say, I think that as part of the Ability Center, mission of having leading the most disability-friendly community in the nation, it is our responsibility as small businesses, as, citizens in Perrysburg, Toledo, all the southern counties. It's our responsibility to come together and work together and help educate each other and support our businesses to, obviously, hopefully we can become the most disability-friendly community in the nation.
Well, I don't have anything to add on top of that. That's a perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you so much to the First Solar team for being a part of this, and to everyone who signed up, attended on the Zoom call, is watching on Facebook, and watching wherever you are and at whatever point you are viewing this information. If there's anything that the Ability Center can do for you, reach out. You can find us at abilitycenter.org, and we are looking forward to working with you. It's a journey, like they said, and we're going to keep moving forward. So thank you so much, and thanks for everyone who participated today. You have a wonderful day.